There's some out there that we've got to deal with, and that's fescue. Tall fescue is a problem. And we've figured out ways to feed around it. There's some genetic, there's some genetic ways you can approach this, but broadly cross cattle, you get up in here, it's probably not the answer for you. But we've got to be aware that this is probably the biggest underlying problem in any of our farms where we're out grazing on fescue. Most of it has the toxin in there, and you kind of know about that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But just to review some of the performance, this is a paper that we published back in 2009, but we basically don't get any difference in gain in the winter between the red here, which is toxic fescue, the blue, which is endophyte-free fescue, and the green is max Q. So we did a long-term study where we were really interested in growing this max Q fescue, stocking cattle up on it during the stockpile period in the winter, and hammering the heck out of it, because that's what people are going to do with it, to see if it would survive and what the performance would be like. Well, no difference in the winter. Again, around a pound and 3/10 a day over 3 years. But as we kind of know, you hit spring, and these were grazed from April to the end of June. About a half a pound a day is what we got on those heifers that were grazing that toxic fescue. And we were up here around 1.6, 1.7 with the endophyte-free or the max Q. So the performance advantage there with max Q is pretty, we've seen this over and over. And then, of course, keeping these cattle all along makes a big difference. And actually made a big difference in the final weight on these heifers and the likelihood that they're going to go ahead and bring back. Now, I don't know how we've stayed away from solving this problem. We've got to solve this problem. This is a massive problem. And we've got 8.5 million cows on fescue, 35 million acres. The losses to the industry several years ago were estimated to be $1 billion a year to the overall cattle industry. And that was before calf prices ran up as much as they have now, so it's probably a lot higher number. But if you compare this to some other problems we have, most of us realize that this shipping fever, bovine respiratory disease complex is one of the biggest problems in the industry. Those of you in the stocker business know that that's probably your biggest problem. But if you look at that, and I saw an estimate of this just last year, $1 billion problem. So fescue is a huge problem. And the reason that we don't recognize it is that the losses are not something we see. We don't see a dead calf like we see with BRD. We see a little bit lower breeding rate in our cows. We see a little bit more gain in our calf. We don't pick it up like we do when there's a dead calf laying there and obviously had pneumonia. So we need to be, probably putting more effort into this and working on it. Now, I could probably talk another hour about this, but we've got to be aware there's plant-based approaches we can take, trying to understand toxin levels and suppressing seed heads. The novel endophyte fescues are for real. I mean, they're here. They're an opportunity for us all. But you kind of got to be aggressive in your pasture management to make that work. You've got to kill what you've got and plant something new. And we also have the opportunity to diversify our forage systems, and that's all of these ought to be practiced probably by people that have fescue-based pastures. There are some animal-based things that we can do. Genetic markers for selection are certainly out there and coming. Progesterone supplementation of heifers, some of the feed-through remedies, Tasco and some of the other stuff that's been tried, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. There's a whole list of those. But one of the main things that I've struggled with is we don't really know how to predict when the toxin level is going to be high. Some years you don't have much problem. Other years you have a terrible problem. And it seems to me like the last 4 or 5 years, and this may be because of the droughts that we had in the late 2000s, we just seem to have more and more fescue problems. And people calling me and saying, well, I did everything you said, my cows only gained a pound a day, with 7 pounds of feed. Well, I got a feeling that this could be some fescue issues. So if we look at what we know that during the winter, the fescue toxins drop dramatically. This is, again, some of our data. But ergot alkaloid content started around 2000 in the fall, around Thanksgiving time, and then it declined pretty dramatically down to near zero by this time of year. So again, stockpiling some fescue and letting it go through some hard freezes may have some benefits from a toxin perspective. That happened both of the years of that study. And I wish I had more data on the growing season. And actually, when I started talking to John about this talk, he said, well, we actually collected some data last summer on this in this area. And so just thought if you've not seen this, I'd show it. But 500 parts per billion here is probably a livable level. If it was below that, we probably could live with it. And you can see that starting in May, they had about 1,000. And this hovered around between 1,000 and 4,000 the whole grazing season. So that's high. That's really, really high. And I wish we had more. I wish we knew 3 years and all of those kinds of things, John, but certainly we'll get at that. One of the things that's interesting is the variability. And so these little black dots are the individual samples that were taken on those different dates. This is a pretty big data set. And you notice the variability is tremendous. And why that is, nobody knows. And again, this data didn't really show a dramatic, that it's always when there's seed heads there, it's high, and it's low otherwise. But we've got a lot to learn about this, and I just encourage you to keep on and think about it. Now, I'm going to take 2 more minutes and finish this, because one of the things that we really want people to do is to look at their system and don't think about, I got to kill all this fescue and replace it all. That's just over most people's head. Most people can't do that anyway, because you've got to have cattle somewhere during the time that you're fixing that. So we're getting folks to look at their system and think about, take out maybe 10% of your acreage and think about converting that to non-toxics. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to go through a cycle of several years of annuals. Now, you've probably heard folks talk about a smother spray program where you basically grow a summer annual for 1 year and then come back with non-toxics. But the potential for seed carryover and that sort of thing is great. The other thing that we need to realize is that a lot of our folks that have fescue-based pastures have never had to plant pasture. I mean, on my own home farm, those pastures were planted in the early 50s, and they're still there. It's still heavily, they get more fescue all the time. So I've not had a lot of experience going out there on my land and planting